Ghost-type Pokemon have the creepiest Pokédex entry that is sometimes based on real-life haunting story or creepy folklore around the world. We will also try to find out its equivalent on Filipino folklore, like Ghastly and its evolutions. According to Ghastly's Pokédex entry, the Pokemon is in constant poisonous gaseous form that can instantly suffocate anyone who will be engulfed by it. This is where its ghost poison typing comes from. If you are a ghost-type trainer or happen to have this, you should be cautious, or you will perish. Ghastly probably inspired by Will-O-Wisp, a popular folklore creature of a spirit in the shape of gaseous ball. In the Philippines, we call this creature Sant Elmo, a word plays from St. Elmo's fire. Ghastly's second evolution, Haunter, is thought to be a dimension-hopping mischievous stalker Pokemon that can kill its victim in one lick. Like a Filipino folklore creature, Dila, that sucks the life of its victim, that is usually the pregnant, infant, or sick person. But unlike Haunter, who was derived from a ghost, Dila is a ghoul that takes the form of a human during the day. Jengar is the final form of Ghastly and the most humanoid of the three. Its Pokédex entry says that it haunts people, sends chills and eerie feelings to those near it, sometimes pretends like it's your shadow, and sends people to their demise in the woods. You can say that it is inspired by a ghost. Known in many around the world and known here in the Philippines as Multo. An apparition that haunts people or sometimes leads them to their demise. The Mega Evolution and Gigantamax form of Jengar describe as a creature linking its body to other dimension or afterlife, and if you stand near a Gigantamax Jengar, you will hear your dead loved ones calling you to a tunnel-like mouth of this Pokemon. Cantonian Cubone has one of the saddest backstories in Generation 1, where Cubone wore the skull of its deceased mother, and once it overcomes the grief it turns into Marowak, which is more aggressive in nature. While Alolan Marowak's secondary ghost typing is caused by adaptation, causing it to become a conjurer of a sort. This Pokemon is said to develop a third eye that conjures or calls dead allies to help them in battle. The second generation added only one ghost-type Pokemon, which is Misdreavus, a ghost Pokemon that loves to scare people by shrieking and pulling their hair, much like a poltergeist, who is probably its inspiration. In Philippine mythology, it resembles Tiyanak, a ghoul that has a form of a baby. It is said that Tiyanak comes from stillbirth. It cries and baits its victim, thinking they are lost baby in the wood. It can also be compared with Kaluluwang Liga, or lost souls that haunt people by crying out loud or possessing an animate object. Often, they are victims of violent crime. It will have a secondary evolution in Generation 4 that looks like a witch in a cloak. Its name is Mismagius. Its Pokédex entry describes it as crying out loud that sounds like incantation and plays hex or curses on people who hear it. Its equivalent on Filipino folklore is a Mangkukulam, or witch that plays hex and curse to people. Unlike this Pokemon, which is a human that knows the power of dark arts. Hisuian Typhlosion is described as a spirit-eating Pokemon to purify them and guide them to the afterlife. It is probably inspired by Shinto religious ritual of purification, like Hari, and beings like Kami that have the ability to purify. Larian Corsola and its evolution Cursula is a variant of Corsola that died due to climate change. It resembles a dead coral due to its white color, and according to its entry, if you step on its branches your life force might be sucked out. Its evolution Cursula shows a broken shell revealing a ghostly form. Shedinja is a Generation 3 Pokemon that is probably inspired by cicada shedding its shell and a poltergeist possessing inanimate object or things, as evidence of its entry that this Pokemon is immobile and doesn't breathe. It also sucks the soul of an unknowing person who peeks on its back. Sableye is a Pokemon based on an alien encounter of a Kentucky native known as Hopkinsville Goblin. It has an impish look with a gemstone-like eye that is said to steal the soul of anyone who looks at it. Its Mega Evolution just carries a big gem that works as a shield. Shuppet's design is inspired by Taro Taro Bozu, a traditional Japanese doll that used by farmer as talisman as to prevent rainy days from coming. Its Pokemon entry, however, is inspired by another type of ghost called Wraith, a creature that feeds the negative emotion of a person. Its evolution and its Mega Evolution Banette are described as a vengeful spirit that possesses stuffed toys. Next on the list is Duskull, a stylized version of Grim Reaper or Death. It is said that they like crying, misbehaving children, and sometimes takes their spirit. The evolve is Dusclops. Its design is like a combination of Cyclops and Mommy. According to its entry, it sucks people into the void and eats will-o-wisp in the forest. The third evolution is Dusknoir, a Pokemon that resembles Cyclops and a Djinn, or famously known as Genie, a Middle Eastern creature. Its Pokédex entry states that it eats only the soul and expels the body. It also defines as a spirit guide, but sometimes it accidentally takes the soul of the living. Drifloon is a drifting balloon that is said to be an amalgamation of lost soul of people and Pokemon. It also lures children away to the afterlife. While its hot air balloon-like evolution, Drifloon is described as a Pokemon that carries people aimlessly. A female Snorunt, an ice-type, will evolve to Frostlass. This Pokemon is inspired by a Japanese folklore creature named Yukiana. Its Pokédex entry said it displays its frozen victim of handsome young men. And just like its inspiration, they both a spirit of a vengeful woman who died in the frozen mountain and seek revenge on misbehaving men. Rotom is also inspired by Poltergeist and will-o-wisp as evidence of its ability to possess or enter household objects. Giratina is the first legendary ghost-type Pokemon and can be considered as the demon of the Pokemon universe. It has two forms, the Altered and Origin form. It is said to be banished to the Distortion world by Arceus because of his behavior. That is why it seeks revenge from its creator. Story sounds familiar because they patterned it to story of Lucifer in the Bible. Commonly seen in ancient cemeteries. Both Anovian and Galarian Yamask and its evolution Cofagrigus and Runerigus are connected with the dead. Anovian Yamask is the spirit of an ancient dead person who carries his death mask. It is inspired by Egyptian tales of death. While Galarian Yamask is possessed by a cursed rune or tablet, probably inspired by runestone engraving for the dead Vikings. As you can see in their evolution form, Cofagrigus looks like an Egyptian sarcophagus, while Runerigus is inspired by cursed runestones. Cofagrigus turns grave robber into mummies, while Runerigus' dark parts shows its victim its dark past when they touch it. The Hisuian Zoroa and Zoroark are both ghost type that is inspired by Japanese folklore. According to the Pokédex entry, Zoroa that didn't survive the Hisuian environment and died was reborn. Literally a ghost form of Zoroa, and when evolves to Zoroark it still carries the hatred it has before it dies. Frillish and its evolution Jellicent is a jellyfish-like ghost Pokemon. Probably both inspired by Asian folklore of river/sea spirit that drags people on the bottom of the water to drown and feeds on its spirit. When we are young, we are always told by our elders to be very careful near the body of water because it might have spirits that will drown us when we swim. The evolution line of Litwick is ghost type that steals the souls of its victim. Litwicks pretend to be a guide where in reality it sucks the life force of a person. Lampent on the other hand is a messenger of death because it hangs around people who are dying and pretend to guide their spirit where in fact, they will steal them. Chandelure probably inspired by a Filipino folklore during a deceased person's wake. According to the tale, a severed head of the deceased surrounded by candles will be seen floating by a relative with a known grudge to the dead. It resembles a chandelier. Next is the Pokemon obviously inspired by the Jewish creature Golem, Galat, and it evolved form Galat. Pokédex entry resembles the description given on Jewish text that an inanimate object molded and brought back to life just like a golem. Honage, Doublade and Aegislash are the evolutionary line inspired by a very familiar ghost story around the world. Weapon is possessed by a spirit like its Pokédex entry that it is a possessed weapon and sucks the life force of its holder. Phantump is inspired by Kodama or Japanese tree spirit. According to its entry, it is the soul of the child died in the forest, possess a tree stump. It cries like a human child to lure victims into the forest. Leaves of this Pokemon have healing properties. Its evolution Trevenant probably inspired by tree monster from literature like Ents from the Tolkien series, and just like tree spirits they are caring to all forest dwellers but will hurt anyone who tries to destroy nature. Next is Pumpkaboo and Gorgiast, both are inspired by Jack-o'-lantern and again Poltergeist. Jack-o'-lantern is an Irish tradition of curving demonic faces on a pumpkin to scare the wandering soul of Stingy Jack. Its entry states that it is a trap spirit in this world that guides other souls to afterlife. The various sizes of this Pokemon are determined by the number of spirits inside the creature or size of the spirit it is taking to the afterlife. Gorgiastin edition can also be inspired by Benehisego, a tool by the Demon King in the classic Chinese story Journey to the West. This tool sucks and traps their opponent. Hoopa in confined form is a jinn-like Pokemon. Jinn or genie is a Middle Eastern folklore creature that can travel in places in an instant or can teleport according to some story. The Sijuayan owl Pokemon, the ghost typing of this Pokemon, is probably inspired by owls' folklore around the world. Owl is often associated with wisdom, witchcraft, and death. Other cultures sees them as a sign of death. Oricorio Sensu type is a Pokemon that summons the spirit of the dead through its dancing. Probably inspired by Shinto ritual dancing of Japan. Sandygast and its evolution Palisand are both Pokemon that possess sand and can be considered a poltergeist. According to its data, Sandygast is a result of the sand mound or castle absorbing the negative energy of the deceased that have fallen in the sand. It hypnotizes people to do its will. Palisand has a much darker entry. All the bodies of its victims are buried under the sand, and the negative energy it collected gives birth to a new Sandygast. Again, Delmise can be considered a poltergeist or a water spirit that drowns and sucks the life force of its victim. Several folklores regarding water spirit are told around the world. Lunala is a legendary Pokemon that might be based on Babylonian, Mayan, and African mythology. Their story has a commonality: the bat is a god that symbolizes night or darkness. Not a malevolent creature like vampire. The ghost typing of this Pokemon might come to the Mayan creature that symbolizes death. Its Pokédex entry said that this creature draws power from the moon and resides on another dimension, and when fused with Necrozma, they form the Dawnwing Necrozma. Necrozma takes control of Lunala's body and absorbs its light. Marshadao is obviously based on folklore regarding shadow. Based on the story's spirit that lurks in the shadow copies the victim and pretend to be its shadow. When its victim fell asleep, it gives nightmare or even sleep paralysis. Just like its Pokédex data, Marshadao like to lurks in the dark and mimics its enemies. Blacephalon's ghost typing might come from the fact that it's draining the vitality of its opponent and its head is detached to its body. Much like ghost story that we hear. Sinistia and its evolved form Poltergeist is based on poltergeist, the spirit that possess object. The data regarding this Pokemon is said to be born when a spirit possesses a leftover cup of tea. Bad things will happen to anyone who mistakes it for tea and drinks from these Pokemons. Spiritome might be inspired by legend and myth of the dead attached to the place where they met their demise. In its Pokédex entry, 108 spirits reside a cursed tomb. They also cast curses to their enemies. Dreepy, Dracloak, and Dragapult are based on an extinct amphibian called Diplocolus manicornis. As its entry states, it is a reborn ghost of a prehistoric creature. Spectrier might be based on Puka and Kelpies of British folklore regarding a ghost horse. Like Kelpie's Pokemon counterpart, they both absorb the life force of their victim. While Puka, a shapeshifter, often resembles black horses and can only be ridden by one being. Basculegion is a combination of a fish that swims upstream to lay eggs like salmon and the biblical demon called Legion, whose numerous spirits possess a person that Jesus has exorcised. Like Basculegion, it will evolve when the spirits of fallen Basculin possess the body of a white-striped Basculin. 2 new Pokemon on the upcoming Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is revealed to be ghost type. No other data is available at the moment, but based on its apparent cerulage, might be based on Ghost Knight in armor that we often see in literature and movies. It might be also based on Soul Edge story. The other is Grievard, who might be based on deceased pet.